Welcome. Take a breath. You're here now at the Lotus Sleeper. Tonight, we journey together into one of the most sacred moments in all of Buddhist history. The Buddha's first sermon, delivered 2,500 years ago in a quiet deer park near the ancient city of Varanasi. No rush, no pressure, just gentle wisdom unfolding like lotus petals at dawn. Let your body begin to settle. Your shoulders drop, your jaw soften. Whatever brought you here tonight, whatever weight you've been carrying, whatever questions whisper in your mind, you can set them down now. Just for these hours, just for this peaceful journey we'll take together. The day is done. The night has arrived. And in this sacred space between waking and sleep, we can truly hear these ancient words. Words that changed the world. Words that can guide us. Even now. Even tonight. Before we begin our journey into this profound teaching, if you'd like to connect with fellow travelers on this path, leave a comment below telling us, what time is it where you are? Where in the world are you listening from? And how are you feeling in this moment? There's something beautiful about knowing we're all here together, across time zones and continents, from bustling cities and quiet countryside, finding peace in the same ancient wisdom, like pilgrims gathering in that deer park long ago. We gather now in this shared silence, in this common seeking. Now, let's begin. The air is still. The night is quiet. And somewhere in the vast expanse of time echoes a voice that first spoke these truths. Not in thunder, but in gentle certainty, like rain falling on dry earth. Tonight, we return to Sarnath, to the deer park, to that turning point when the Wheel of Dharma first began to roll, carrying its teachings across centuries, across oceans, until they found their way to us. The Buddha sat beneath the trees, 5 companions before him, men who had abandoned him, men who now would hear the truth he'd discovered. And in that teaching, in those first words, lay the seeds of a path that millions would walk, a path that leads from suffering to peace, from confusion to clarity, from restlessness to profound rest. Let your breathing slow, deepen, become like waves on a distant shore, regular, peaceful, effortless. Tonight, we walk that path together, slowly, gently, with all the time in the world. We'll discover what the Buddha taught on that full moon evening, why it mattered then, and why it still whispers to our hearts today. There's nowhere else you need to be, nothing else you need to do. Just listen, let go, and allow these ancient truths to carry you toward sleep. As your body settles deeper into rest, as your mind becomes quieter, let us begin our journey into the Buddha's first sermon. The story begins not at Sarnath, but some weeks earlier, in a place called Bodh Gaya, beneath a great tree with heart-shaped leaves. There, a man named Siddhartha Gautama sat in meditation, and through the long watches of the night, through darkness into dawn, he penetrated the deepest mysteries of existence. He awakened and became the Buddha, the awakened one. According to the traditional accounts, he was 35 years old, and he had been seeking this awakening for 6 long years. But the path to that moment, the path to that tree, had been neither straight nor simple. The traditional narratives tell us that Siddhartha had been born a prince in a palace in the foothills of the Himalayas, in what is now Nepal, in a kingdom called Kapilavastu, in the lands of the Shakya clan. His father, King Suddhodana, had surrounded him with every pleasure, every comfort, every beauty the world could offer, hoping to keep his son from the spiritual life that sages had predicted. According to the traditional account, when Siddhartha was born, 8 learned Brahmins had been called to read the infant's future, to interpret the auspicious marks on his body. 7 of them had predicted 2 possible destinies. The child would become either a great emperor, conquering the world with armies, or a great spiritual teacher, conquering suffering with wisdom. But one Brahmin, the youngest, a man named Kondañña, had seen with certainty this child would become a Buddha. an awakened one, a teacher of profound truth. And the texts tell us that Kondañña had vowed, when this happens, I will become his disciple. He did not know then how long he would wait for that promise to be fulfilled. And when he ventured beyond the palace walls, he saw what his father had tried to hide. According to the traditional narrative, he saw an old person, bent with age. He saw a sick person, writhing in pain. He saw a corpse being carried to cremation, and he saw a wandering ascetic, calm and serene despite owning nothing. These 4 sights, as they are known in Buddhist literature, shook him to his core. They showed him that all beings, no matter how protected, face aging, sickness, and death, and that perhaps in renunciation, in seeking, there might be a way beyond suffering. And so, at age 29, in the middle of the night, Siddhartha left his palace, left his sleeping wife and infant son, left all his wealth and privilege, and became a wandering seeker. Let your body sink deeper now. Feel the bed or chair supporting you completely. There's nothing you need to hold. Kondañña, according to the tradition, true to his long ago vow, joined him, along with 4 other young men, sons of the Brahmins who had predicted Siddhartha's destiny. Their names were Bhaddiya, Vappa, Mahānāma, and Assaji. And together, these 5 ascetics became Siddhartha's companions on the spiritual path. First, Siddhartha sought out the greatest meditation masters of his time, teachers named Ara Kalama and Uddaka Ramaputta. He learned their techniques, mastered their teachings, reached the highest states of consciousness they could show him. But still, he was not satisfied. These states were peaceful, but temporary. When they ended, suffering returned. This was not the final answer he sought. So Siddhartha and his 5 companions, Kondañña, Bhaddiya, Vappa, Mahānāma, and Assaji, traveled to a forest called Uruvela, and there they practiced severe asceticism, extreme self-mortification. They believed, as many seekers of that time believed, that the body was an obstacle to spiritual awakening, that by denying it, by punishing it, by reducing it almost to nothing, the spirit would be freed, truth would be revealed. The early Buddhist texts describe how Siddhartha practiced these austerities more intensely than anyone. He sat in meditation without moving for days. He held his breath until his head pounded. He ate only a single grain of rice each day, sometimes eating nothing at all. His body became skeletal. His skin darkened and withered. His bones jutted out. His hair fell out. He could feel his spine through his stomach. He was close to death. The 5 ascetics admired his dedication. Surely, they thought, if anyone will achieve enlightenment through this path, it will be Siddhartha. But after 6 years of this extreme practice, Siddhartha realized something crucial. This wasn't working either. If you tune the string too tight, the teacher said, it will break. But if you leave it too loose, it will not play. The string must be tuned just right, neither too tight nor too loose. This story, whether historical or illustrative, captures an essential insight. Siddhartha had lived 2 extremes. First, the extreme of sensual indulgence in his father's palace, and now the extreme of self-denial in the forest. Neither extreme led to awakening. What was needed was a middle way, a path of balance, neither indulgence nor denial, but mindful moderation, taking care of the body without being enslaved by it, disciplining the mind without destroying the vessel that carries it. Siddhartha got up from his meditation spot, walked to a nearby river, bathed his emaciated body, and when a young woman named Sujata offered him a bowl of milk rice, he accepted it and ate. His strength began to return. His mind cleared. He felt, for the first time in years, that he was on the right path. But his 5 companions, Kondañña, Bhaddiya, Vappa, Mahānāma, and Assaji, were horrified and disappointed. Siddhartha has given up, they said to each other. He has abandoned the quest. He has become weak, indulgent. He has failed. They left him. These 5, who had been his constant companions for 6 years. They walked away, traveling north toward Varanasi, toward a quiet grove known as the Deer Park at Isipatana, now called Sarnath. There, in their disappointment, in their judgment of Siddhartha, they continued their ascetic practices, waiting, hoping, seeking, and Siddhartha, now alone, walked to a great fig tree, spread grass beneath it, and sat down to meditate with a vow. He would not rise, not until he had found the answer to suffering, even if it cost him his life. Through the night he sat, unmoved, unmoving, watching his mind, observing the nature of reality, penetrating deeper and deeper into the truth of existence. According to the canonical account in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, he saw his past lives, stretching back through countless incarnations. He saw the arising and passing of all beings. He saw the chain of causation, how suffering arises, and how it can cease. And as the morning star appeared in the sky before dawn, he achieved complete and total awakening. He saw everything as it truly is, no longer colored by ignorance or craving or aversion. He had become a Buddha, an awakened one. Feel your breathing now, so slow, so steady, like the Buddha's breath in that moment of supreme peace. Let go. Let go. Here we must note that the ancient sources differ regarding exactly how long this period lasted. The Vinaya texts mention 4 or 5 weeks, while the Lalitavistara and other sources describe 7 weeks. Some scholars suggest the journey from Bodh Gaya to Sarnath took approximately 8 days, placing the first sermon about 57 days after the Enlightenment. These variations remind us that ancient biographies were not concerned with the precise chronological details that modern historians seek, but rather with conveying the spiritual significance of events. What the sources agree upon is that during this period after enlightenment, the Buddha contemplated whether to teach. The truth he had found was so subtle, so contrary to ordinary thinking, so difficult to grasp. Would anyone understand? Would anyone believe him? Why not simply dwell in this blissful peace he had attained, living quietly, teaching no one? According to the traditional account preserved in the Ayakana Sutta, it was at this moment that Brahma Sahampati, a deity in Buddhist cosmology, appeared before the Buddha and requested him to teach. Modern scholars interpret this story in various ways. Some understand Brahma Sahampati as representing the Buddha's own inner dialogue, his compassionate wisdom arising within his meditation. Others see it as a traditional narrative device common in ancient Indian religious texts. What matters is the teaching it conveys, the Buddha's compassion, his recognition that some beings were ready to understand. "Lord," Brahma requested, "there are beings with but little dust in their eyes who are falling away because they do not hear the teaching. Teach, O Blessed One, for the sake of those who can understand." And the Buddha, with his newly awakened vision, looked out across the world and saw beings of every kind, some heavily obscured by confusion and craving, some with only a thin veil covering their understanding. He saw that there were those who could hear, who could understand, who could awaken, and his heart, vast with compassion, opened, and he decided, "I will teach." But whom should he teach first? To whom should he offer this precious gift of Dharma, of truth? According to the Ariyapariyesana Sutta, he thought of his former teachers, Assaji, Arakalama, and Uddaka Ramaputta. They were wise. They would understand. But his awakened consciousness revealed to him they had already died. They had passed away during his years of practice. Then he thought of the 5 ascetics, Kondañña, Bhaddiya, Vappa, Mahānāma, and Assaji, his former companions, who had left him in disappointment. They were sincere seekers. They had practiced diligently for years. They knew the limitations of extreme asceticism. They would understand the middle way he had discovered. And so, the Buddha set out walking from Bodh Gaya toward Varanasi, toward the deer park at Sarnath, a journey the texts describe as taking approximately 8 days. walking steadily, mindfully, already teaching through his very presence, his calm, his radiance, and the Buddha, speaking truth, replied, "I have no teacher. I am the perfectly enlightened one. I am going to Varanasi to set in motion the Wheel of Dharma, to beat the drum of the deathless." But Upaka, perhaps thinking this claim too bold, simply shook his head, said, "Maybe so, friend," and walked away down a different path. The Buddha continued on, unhurried, certain, and finally he arrived at the deer park, a beautiful grove about 8 kilometers northeast of Varanasi, near where the Ganges and Varuna rivers meet. This place was called Isipatana in Pali, Si'atu 0, Saidisa Ipatana in Sanskrit, which can be translated as the place where holy men fell to earth, a name that may come from an ancient legend, or may simply mean the place where sages dwell. It is now known as Sarnath, a name that according to tradition means Lord of the Deer, connected to a story of a compassionate deer king, though the actual etymology may derive from the term Saranganath, Lord of Deer. Let your shoulders drop even further, your jaw release. Feel yourself drifting, held safely by this story, this moment. It was to this peaceful sanctuary, this protected grove, where according to tradition, no animal would be harmed, a refuge of peace, that the 5 ascetics had come, continuing their austere practices, sitting in meditation, eating little, seeking liberation through self-denial. And it was here, according to Buddhist tradition, on the evening of the full moon in the month that corresponds to July, that the Buddha would give his first teaching, the teaching that would be preserved as the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the discourse on the turning of the Wheel of Dharma, the wheel, an ancient symbol representing the sun, the cycle of life, the movement of truth through the world. The Buddha would set this wheel in motion, and it would turn for 25 centuries. And it turns still. As the Buddha approached the deer park, one of the 5 ascetics, Assaji, saw him from a distance, coming through the trees, walking with extraordinary grace and presence. According to the Vinaya account, Assaji ran to tell his 4 companions, Kondañña, Bhaddiya, Vappa, and Mahānāma. Our friend Gautama is coming, the one who gave up the practice, and they agreed among themselves. When he arrives, we should not stand up in respect. We should not take his bowl. We should not offer him a seat. He abandoned the path. He became indulgent. We will acknowledge him only as an equal, not as a teacher. But when the Buddha actually came near, when they could see him clearly, something happened that they did not expect. Despite their agreement, despite their resolution, they found themselves standing up. They couldn't help it. Their bodies moved of their own accord, responding to the profound presence, the unmistakable transformation they saw before them. They called him Friend Gautama, trying to treat him as an equal, but their hearts already knew, already sensed, something fundamental had changed, and the Buddha, with gentle firmness, said something to the effect, "Do not address me by name. Do not address me as friend. I have attained complete liberation. I am the Tathagata, the one who has found the truth." They were skeptical. Of course they were. They had seen him abandon asceticism. How could he claim enlightenment? But they could not deny what they saw. The luminosity, the peace, the absolute confidence without a trace of pride, the radiance that seemed to emanate from his very being. And so they agreed to listen. The sun was setting. The deer in the grove settled in the grass. The air grew cool and still. And in that peaceful evening, the Buddha began to speak. And what he said in those next hours would change everything, would birth a teaching that would spread across Asia and eventually the world, would offer a path from suffering to freedom that millions would walk. This was the first turning of the Wheel of Dharma, and we are about to hear what was said. Feel yourself there, in that grove, in that peace, in that moment when truth began to speak. The Buddha began simply, directly, speaking from his own experience, sharing what he had discovered, not as dogma, but as truth tested in the fire of his own life. According to the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, as preserved in the Pali Canon, the Buddha said, "There are these two extremes that one who has gone forth should not pursue: devotion to the indulgence of sensual pleasures, which is low, vulgar, common, ignoble, unbeneficial, and devotion to self-mortification, which is painful, ignoble, unbeneficial." His voice would have been calm, unhurried, like a stream flowing over smooth stones. The 5 ascetics leaned forward, listening. Avoiding both of these extremes, the Buddha continued, the Tathagata has awakened to the middle way, which gives vision, which gives knowledge, which leads to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to nibbana. The middle way, neither indulgence nor denial, a path they had not considered. Let your breathing deepen now. Slow down. There's no hurry. We have all night, all the time you need. He had beautiful companions, intellectual stimulation, physical luxury beyond what most people could imagine, a life designed specifically to satisfy every desire, to keep him perpetually pleased, perpetually distracted. And he had learned, through living it fully, that sensual pleasure does not lead to lasting happiness. It is temporary, fleeting, always requiring more, creating a hunger that can never be finally satisfied. When the pleasure ends, as it always does, dissatisfaction returns, and with it comes craving, grasping for the next pleasure, the next distraction, caught on a wheel that spins endlessly without progress. Indulgence does not free us. It binds us. It makes us dependent on conditions we cannot control. It places our peace in the hands of external circumstances, in things that inevitably change, decay, disappear. More than that, the pursuit of pleasure often leads us to harmful actions, to taking what is not ours, to exploiting others, to losing ourselves in addiction, to sacrificing long-term well-being for immediate gratification. The Buddha had seen through all of this. From the inside, he knew the golden cage was still a cage. The silk chains were still chains. Feel your body relaxing more deeply, sinking further into comfort, into ease. Notice how rest comes not from pleasure, but from letting go. But then, when Siddhartha left the palace, he had swung to the opposite extreme, believing that the body was the problem, that physical existence itself was an obstacle, that by punishing the body, by reducing it to near nothing, the spirit would be liberated. This view was common among seekers of his time. Many spiritual traditions taught that enlightenment required extreme asceticism, fasting, exposure to harsh elements, suppression of all physical comfort, sometimes even deliberate self-injury. The logic seemed sound. If attachment to pleasure causes suffering, then surely complete denial of pleasure would end suffering. If the body's demands distract us from truth, then surely silencing those demands would clear the path to awakening. And so Siddhartha practiced, with Kondañña, Bhaddiya, Vappa, Mahānāma, and Assaji beside him, practices of extraordinary severity. The Mahānāma Sutta describes how he ate so little that when he touched his stomach, he could feel his spine. His skin became blackened and dried. His eyes sank deep into his skull. His hair fell out. When he tried to stand, he fell. When he urinated, the pain was intense. He sat unmoving for days, suppressing all bodily functions, enduring pain that would have broken most people. The texts describe him as looking like a skeleton covered with blackened skin, barely alive. And he realized, with profound clarity, this is not the way either. Self-torture doesn't lead to enlightenment any more than self-indulgence does. Both are extremes that miss the mark. Both are based on a fundamental misunderstanding. The body is not the enemy. It is not an obstacle to be overcome, but neither is it the source of ultimate happiness. It is simply what it is, a condition for consciousness in this life, neither to be indulged nor denied, but to be cared for appropriately. Like a good instrument must be maintained to produce beautiful music. Let your jaw soften, your hands release any tension. The Buddha is showing us something so important, so practical. When we are starving, we cannot meditate clearly. When we are exhausted, we cannot maintain awareness. When we are in severe pain, the mind cannot settle into the peace necessary for deep insight. Similarly, when we are overindulged, overfed, intoxicated, distracted by pleasure, the mind is equally unable to see clearly, equally trapped, just in a different prison. The middle way the Buddha discovered is not compromise, not a little bit of both extremes, not moderation in the sense of mediocrity. As scholar Y. Karunadasa notes, the middle path does not mean moderation or a compromise between the two extremes. Rather, as the sutta states, it means without entering either of the two extremes. Rather, it is a precise tuning, like that string on the lute, finding the exact tension that allows the instrument to sing. Not too tight, not too loose, but just right. In practical terms, this meant eating enough to maintain health and energy, but not overindulging, sleeping enough to be rested, but not escaping into sloth, practicing diligently, but not pushing to the point of harm, taking care of the body's genuine needs, while not being enslaved by its endless wants. This was revolutionary teaching. Most spiritual paths of the Buddha's time insisted on one extreme or the other, either ritualized pleasure-seeking or severe asceticism. The Buddha was proposing something entirely different, a balanced path that honored both the body's reality and the spirit's aspiration. But the middle way was not just about physical practices. It extended to views, to understanding, to how we approach reality itself. In philosophy, people tend toward extremes. Some say everything exists permanently, unchanging, eternal. This is called eternalism. Others say nothing really exists. All is void, meaningless. This is called nihilism or annihilationism. The Buddha's middle way rejected both these extremes, teaching instead what would later be articulated as dependent origination, that things exist dependently, arising from causes and conditions, real while they exist, but not permanent, not fixed, not independently existing, not nothing, but also not eternal somethings. Feel yourself drifting now, floating on these words. There's nothing to hold on to, nothing to figure out. Just rest. In emotional and psychological terms, the middle way means not suppressing feelings, but also not being carried away by them, not pretending we don't hurt, but also not drowning in our pain, not forcing positivity, but not surrendering to negativity. Finding that place of aware balance where we can feel fully, but not be overwhelmed. In spiritual practice, it means neither lazy neglect nor obsessive striving, neither giving up nor forcing, neither complacency nor burnout. A gentle, persistent, balanced effort, like water slowly wearing down stone, not through force, but through consistency. The Buddha lived this teaching. After his awakening, he continued to eat one meal a day, to live simply as a wandering monk, to practice meditation and teach. But he took care of his health. He allowed rest. He accepted necessary support. He walked the middle way he taught. And this is what he was explaining to the 5 ascetics that evening in the deer park, not through abstract philosophy, but through his own story, his own journey through both extremes and into balance. Kondañña, Bhaddiya, Vappa, Mahānāma, and Assaji listened, and slowly they began to understand. They had witnessed Siddhartha try both extremes. They had judged him for leaving asceticism, but now they saw he hadn't given up. He had found the way. The middle way is not always obvious. It requires wisdom to discern. What is enough food? What is enough rest? What is appropriate pleasure? And what is harmful indulgence? What is healthy discipline? And what is damaging denial? There is no rigid rule, no external standard. Each person must find their own balance, must learn through practice and awareness, must tune their own instrument. But the principle is clear. Extremes lead away from awakening. Balance leads toward it. The path to liberation is walked in the middle, neither grasping nor rejecting, neither inflating nor deflating, neither clinging nor escaping. And this middle way, the Buddha said, is the noble eightfold path. Though we won't explore that path in detail tonight, saving it for another journey. What matters now is this principle of balance, this invitation to find the middle way in all aspects of life. Your breathing is so slow now, so easy. Your body knows this middle way, not too tense, not too collapsed, just resting, just being, perfectly balanced between effort and ease. The Buddha was inviting his 5 former companions, and he is inviting us to stop fighting ourselves, to stop swinging from one extreme to another, to find that place of wise balance where growth is possible, where awakening can unfold naturally like a lotus opening to the sun. This teaching of the middle way would become foundational to Buddhism. It would influence how practitioners approach meditation, morality, even philosophy and politics. It would counsel against fanaticism of every kind, against rigid dogmatism, against both permissiveness and puritanism. Thich Nhat Hanh, another modern master, would teach walking meditation at a pace that was neither rushed nor lethargic, saying, "Walk as if you are kissing the earth with your feet, embodying the middle way in every step, not punishing, not indulging, but mindful, balanced, present. Let everything soften now. Let go of any tension, any holding, any trying. Just be balanced, peaceful, at rest." The 5 ascetics in the deer park that evening were beginning to see. Their former companion had indeed found something extraordinary. Not by abandoning the spiritual search, but by abandoning the extremes that make the search impossible. And as the Buddha continued to speak, as the full moon rose higher in the sky, as the deer lay peaceful in the grass, the wheel of Dharma began to turn, slowly at first, but with a momentum that would carry truth across continents and centuries, that would reach, somehow, miraculously, even to us, sitting here tonight, listening, learning, walking our own middle way. After explaining the middle way, the Buddha continued his teaching, speaking words that would be remembered, preserved, recited, studied for 25 centuries. The text of this sermon has come down to us as the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, which means the discourse on the setting in motion of the Wheel of Dharma. In Sanskrit, it is called the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, and it exists in several versions across different Buddhist traditions, preserved in the Pali canon's Samyutta Nikaya, in the Chinese Samyukta Agama, in Tibetan translations, and in various Vinaya texts. But the core teaching remains consistent, powerful, transformative. Let your whole body release now, sink deeper into comfort, into this ancient teaching, into this moment of rest. The title itself is significant. The Wheel of Dharma, Dhammacakka in Pali, Dharmacakra in Sanskrit. The wheel, Kakka or chakra, was an ancient symbol in India, representing the sun rolling across the sky, bringing light, also representing sovereignty, the wheel of a chariot rolling forward, conquering, spreading, also representing the cycle of life, birth, death, rebirth, the turning of existence. For the Buddha to set this wheel in motion meant to initiate a teaching that would spread, that would illuminate, that would transform, that would roll forward through time, carrying truth to beings everywhere. The Dharma wheel traditionally has 8 spokes, representing the eightfold path the Buddha taught. And when you see images of this sermon in temples and museums across Asia, you will often see a wheel flanked by 2 deer, representing the deer park where this teaching occurred. The famous Ashoka pillars, erected by the great Indian emperor 250 years after the Buddha's death, around 260 BCE, topped with carved lions supporting a Dharma wheel, honor this first sermon, this first turning, this moment when the Buddha's teaching began its journey through the world. Now, the Dhammacakka itself is more than just a symbol. It represents something profound about the nature of the Buddha's teaching. The teaching is not static, not a fixed doctrine carved in stone, but dynamic, turning, moving, applicable in different ways to different situations and people. The wheel turns, and as it turns, it covers ground. It moves forward. It creates momentum. Similarly, the Dharma, when practiced, creates momentum toward awakening, toward freedom, toward the end of suffering. The wheel is also circular, without beginning or end, representing the continuity of truth. Truth that existed before the Buddha discovered it. Truth that will exist after. Eternal truth, unconditioned, just waiting to be found, to be spoken, to be understood. Feel your breathing, circular, continuous, breath coming, breath going, like a wheel turning, effortless, natural. In that first sermon, after explaining the middle way, the Buddha presented the core teachings that would become the foundation of Buddhism. According to most versions of the text, he taught what would later be formulated as the Four Noble Truths, though some scholars suggest that earlier versions may have emphasized different aspects, particularly the insight into impermanence. What we can say with confidence is that the Buddha shared his direct experience, not religious dogma, not philosophical speculation, but what he had seen with his own awakened awareness, describing the nature of existence, why beings suffer, and the path to the cessation of suffering. Practical, direct, verifiable through practice. This was not a teaching to be believed on faith, but to be tested, practiced, proven in one's own experience. As scholar Richard Gombrich notes, of course, we do not really know what the Buddha said in his first sermon, and it has even been convincingly demonstrated that the language of the text as we have it is in the main a set of formulae, expressions which are by no means self-explanatory, but refer to already established doctrines. Nevertheless, the compilers of the canon put in the first sermon what they knew to be the very essence of the Buddha's enlightenment. This reminds us that what we have is not a verbatim transcript, but the tradition's understanding of what was essential, what the early community recognized as the heart of the Buddha's awakening. "Come and see," the Buddha would often say, "ehipassiko," meaning, don't just believe me, come and see for yourself. Practice this path, test it, discover if it's true. This empirical approach was remarkable for its time. Most religious teachings demanded blind faith, obedience to divine authority, acceptance without question. But the Buddha invited investigation, encouraged doubt, welcomed questions. This confidence came from the Buddha's own direct experience. He had seen truth, not as abstract philosophy, but as living reality. And he knew that anyone who practiced correctly would see it too. Let your thoughts drift now. Let your mind soften, like the Buddha inviting us to let go of beliefs, of concepts, and simply experience. The 5 ascetics listened to this teaching, and something began to shift in them. Years of practice, years of sincere seeking had prepared them for this moment. Kondañña, in particular, the eldest, the one who had predicted the Buddha's destiny when Siddhartha was still an infant, began to understand deeply, profoundly, not just intellectually, but with his whole being. The Vinaya account tells us that during the teaching, the spotless, immaculate vision of the Dhamma arose in the venerable Kondañña, and he exclaimed, "Yakinchi samudaya dhamma sabata nirodha dhamma." Whatever has the nature to arise, all that has the nature to cease. This may seem like a simple statement, but it represented a breakthrough, a seeing into the fundamental nature of reality, that all conditioned things are impermanent, that everything that begins also ends, that clinging to anything for permanent satisfaction will inevitably lead to suffering. The Buddha, hearing this exclamation, smiled and said, "Anyasivata bo Kondañño, Anyasivata bo Kondañño." Kondañña knows. Kondañña knows. And from that moment, Kondañña was known as Anya Kondañña, Kondañña who knows. The first person after the Buddha himself to truly understand the Dharma, to awaken to truth, to see through the veil of ignorance that obscures reality. Your eyelids are heavy now, so heavy. Your body completely at rest. Just listening, just absorbing. No need to understand everything. The wisdom will find its way in. But this was just the beginning. The teaching continued over several days. Each day, the Buddha giving further instruction. Each day, more of the 5 ascetics coming to deeper understanding. The next day, according to the Vinaya account, the Buddha gave a second discourse, known as the Anattalakkhana Sutta, the discourse on the characteristic of non-self. This teaching went even deeper, exploring the nature of identity, of what we think we are, showing that there is no permanent, unchanging self, that what we call I is actually a constantly changing process, not a fixed entity. This teaching, too, required careful explanation, careful listening. It was subtle, profound, easy to misunderstand. After hearing this second discourse, the remaining 4 ascetics, Bhaddiya, Vappa, Mahānāma, and Assaji, all achieved the same breakthrough that Kondañña had. All became arahants, fully awakened beings, freed from suffering, liberated from the cycle of rebirth. The texts describe their realization poetically. They had been lost in darkness, and now they saw light. They had been bound, and now they were free. They had been sick, and now they were healed. Now there were 6, the Buddha, and 5 disciples, and this number would grow, slowly at first, then more rapidly, as the teaching spread, as more people heard, practiced, awakened. But it all began here, in this quiet grove, on this full moon evening, with 5 skeptical ascetics who had turned away from their former companion and found instead their greatest teacher. The Dharma wheel had begun to turn, and it would never stop. Feel yourself turning with it, slowly, peacefully, carried by this ancient momentum, this wisdom that has traveled so far, through so many generations, to reach us now. The Buddha would continue teaching for 45 more years, wandering through northern India, giving teachings in royal courts and humble villages, to kings and beggars, to men and women, to young and old, adapting his message to his audience, but always pointing toward the same truth, the same liberation, the same end of suffering. He taught thousands of discourses, some brief, some lasting many days, on every conceivable topic: ethics, meditation, philosophy, psychology, cosmology, history, stories, parables, poems, practical instructions, profound revelations. But this first sermon remained special, foundational, the seed from which all other teachings grew, the beginning of the Dharma that would spread across Asia, across centuries, eventually across the entire world. When Emperor Ashoka, ruling India 2.5 centuries after the Buddha, converted to Buddhism and began spreading the Dharma throughout his empire, he made pilgrimage to the deer park at Sarnath and erected monuments, stupas, pillars, marking this sacred spot, honoring this first teaching. One of those pillars, topped with 4 lions supporting a Dharma wheel, was discovered in modern excavations and became the national emblem of India, a secular nation honoring the spiritual heritage, the teaching of peace and compassion that was born in that deer park so long ago. Let your mind drift now. Imagine that grove, that evening, the gentle light, the peaceful deer, 5 men sitting before 1 man, listening as the world begins to change. Archaeological excavations at Sarnath have revealed the foundations of great monasteries, temples, stupas built over the centuries, layer upon layer of devotion. Pilgrims coming from across Asia, from China and Tibet and Southeast Asia and Sri Lanka, all seeking to stand where the Buddha stood, where the Dharma wheel first turned. Today, if you visit Sarnath, you can see these ruins. The Dhammacakkappavattana rising high, a massive brick structure built to mark the very spot of the sermon. You can visit the museum, see the famous sculpture of the Buddha preaching, hands in the gesture of turning the Dharma wheel, surrounded by the 5 ascetics and the 2 deer, all carved in stone, preserving that moment for eternity. You can sit in the modern Mulaganda Kuti Vihara temple, built in the 1930s, where relics of the Buddha are kept, and imagine the teaching, imagine the voice, the words, the transformation. Your breathing is so slow now, so peaceful, like a pilgrim resting after a long journey. You have found what you were seeking: peace, understanding, rest. The significance of this first sermon cannot be overstated. It established the Buddha not just as an awakened individual, but as a teacher, as one who could transmit the Dharma, who could guide others to the same awakening he had achieved. It established the Dharma itself, showing that enlightenment was not just a personal attainment, but a teachable path, with clear steps, with practices anyone could follow, with results anyone could verify. And it established the Sangha, the community, showing that the spiritual path need not be walked alone, that fellow practitioners support each other, encourage each other, create conditions for collective awakening. These three, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, became known as the Triple Gem, the three jewels, the three refuges that Buddhists take, the three foundations of the entire tradition. And all three were present that evening in Sarnath, emerging together, like a flower opening all at once, revealing its three parts simultaneously: petals, pistil, stem, all necessary, all interdependent, all arising together. Let go completely now. Surrender to sleep, to rest. The teaching will continue, but you can drift. You can release. The wisdom will find you, even in dreams. The Buddha concluded his first sermon with an invitation. The 5 ascetics requested formal ordination. They wanted to become his disciples, to commit themselves fully to this path. And the Buddha ordained them simply by saying, "Etha bhikkhave svakhato dhammo karatha brahmacharya kiddaptaro." Come, O monks, the Dharma has been well proclaimed. Live the holy life for the complete ending of suffering. With those words, they became the first Buddhist monks, the first bhikkhus, the first members of the Sangha that would eventually spread across the world. They shaved their heads, donned simple robes, took up the alms bowl, and began living as wandering mendicants, owning nothing, depending on the generosity of lay supporters, dedicated entirely to practice, to awakening, to serving the Dharma, and the wheel kept turning, kept spreading, carried by these 6 awakened beings, then by more and more, until the teaching the Buddha shared that full moon evening reached unimaginable distances, crossed mountains and oceans, adapted to countless cultures, and yet remained essentially the same, pointing always toward freedom, toward peace, toward the end of suffering in that deer park under the full moon. Something extraordinary was born. Not just a teaching, not just individual awakening, but community, Sangha, fellowship on the path. This community aspect, often overlooked, was essential to the Buddha's vision. He knew that humans are social beings, that we learn together, support each other, inspire one another. Lone practitioners can achieve much, but community amplifies practice, provides accountability, offers mirrors for our blind spots, creates conditions where the Dharma can flourish and spread. The 5 men who became the first Sangha were, each of them, remarkable individuals with their own stories, their own journeys to that evening in Sarnath. Kondañña, the eldest, according to tradition, had known Siddhartha longer than any of them. He had been present at the naming ceremony approximately 40 years earlier. A young Brahmin scholar invited to read the infant's future. The traditional account tells us that while the other 7 Brahmins had offered dual predictions, king or Buddha, emperor or enlightened one, only Kondañña had been certain. This child will become a Buddha, an awakened one. Nothing will prevent it. And young Kondañña, filled with that vision, had made a vow. When this happens, when this child awakens and begins to teach, I will become his disciple. Decades passed. Kondañña grew, became a respected scholar himself. According to the tradition, he married, had a family, lived the life of a householder, Brahmin, teaching, performing rituals, studying the sacred texts. But he never forgot that infant, that prediction, that vow. So when news came that Prince Siddhartha had renounced the world, had left the palace to seek awakening, Kondañña knew, this is it. This is what I saw. This is what I vowed. The texts tell us he left his home, his family, his comfortable life, and followed the wandering prince, keeping his 40-year-old promise. Kondañña was the natural leader among the 5 ascetics, the eldest, the most learned, when they practiced together. He guided them. When they had questions, they turned to him, and so it was fitting, perfect even, that Kondañña was the first to understand, the first to see, to become Añña Kondañña. Kondañña, who knows? His understanding came suddenly, like lightning, but it had been prepared by decades of seeking, decades of practice, decades of ripening. The moment of insight was instant, but the preparation was a lifetime. Let your breathing flow, easy, natural, preparing, ripening, in its own time. Bhaddiya, another of the 5, according to the traditional narratives, came from a noble family. He was the son of one of the 8 Brahmins who had read Siddhartha's fortune. When his father told him about the prophecy, about the prince's destiny, and advised him to watch Siddhartha's path, to join him if he renounced the world, Bhaddiya took it to heart. He was younger than Kondañña, closer to Siddhartha's age, and like Siddhartha, he had grown up with privilege, comfort, education, all the advantages of high birth. But also, like Siddhartha, he felt the pull of deeper questions, the limitations of worldly life, the longing for truth beyond pleasure and politics. When Siddhartha left the palace, Bhaddiya was ready. He joined him, along with Kondañña and the others, becoming a companion on the spiritual quest. The later Buddhist texts describe Bhaddiya as known for his gentleness, his kindness. Even in the harsh ascetic practices, he maintained a soft heart, a compassionate presence. After awakening in the deer park, tradition tells us that Bhaddiya would become famous for his repeated exclamation, "Oh happiness, oh happiness," said so often that other monks wondered, is he missing his former wealth, his comfort? But when asked, Bhaddiya explained, I am celebrating the happiness of liberation, compared to which all worldly pleasure is nothing. I was once surrounded by guards, anxious even in sleep. Now I go alone into the forest and fear nothing. Oh, happiness! His story reminds us the Dharma doesn't make us hard or cold. Awakening doesn't require losing our appreciation and joy. Freedom makes us more alive, more able to celebrate, more capable of genuine happiness. Feel that possibility. Genuine happiness, not dependent on circumstances, arising from within, from freedom. Vappa, the third of the five, was also, according to tradition, the son of one of the 8 Brahmins, and like Bhaddiya, he had been prepared by his father to recognize Siddhartha's destiny. Vappa was quiet, contemplative, more inclined to solitary practice than group discussion, but deeply sincere in his seeking. His name, Vappa, or sometimes called Dashabala Kashyapa, suggests someone of measured strength, and this seemed to fit his personality, not flashy or dramatic, but steady, reliable, persistent. In the 6 years of ascetic practice, the texts suggest Vappa endured everything without complaint, without drama, simply doing what he believed necessary, pushing his body to its limits, because that was the path he understood. When Siddhartha abandoned extreme asceticism, Vappa was among those most disappointed. He had invested so much in that path, believed in it so completely. To see their leader abandon it felt like betrayal. But when Vappa saw the awakened Buddha, heard the teaching, something in him recognized truth. Despite his disappointment, despite his judgment, his deeper wisdom knew, this is it. This is what we've been seeking. According to later accounts, his awakening, when it came, was profound, complete. The texts tell us he never wavered afterward, never doubted, never looked back. He had found what he was seeking, and he knew it. Your mind is so quiet now, so still. like Vappa's mind, settled, certain, at peace. Mahānāma, the fourth, according to the traditional biography, had a special connection to Siddhartha. They were cousins. Mahānāma's father was the brother of King Suddhodana. They had grown up together in the royal palace, playmates, companions, princes together. Mahānāma understood Siddhartha in ways the others couldn't. He had seen the luxury, the pleasure, the comfort from which Siddhartha had fled. He had witnessed the dissatisfaction, the questioning, the growing restlessness. The traditional accounts describe Mahānāma as bringing a certain levity to the group, a warmth. He could lighten tense moments, help the others not take themselves too seriously, maintain perspective. After awakening, later, Buddhist histories tell us that Mahānāma would return to his family, to the Sakya clan, and become instrumental in bringing the Buddha's teaching to his homeland, bridging the spiritual and the social, showing that awakening doesn't require abandoning all relationships, but transforms them, deepens them. He would help establish monasteries, support the Sangha with material resources, introduce many to the Dharma, living proof that lay life and spiritual depth are not incompatible. And finally, Assaji, the youngest of the five, the one who, according to the Vinaya account, first spotted the Buddha approaching the deer park that fateful evening. Assaji's father, like Kondañña's, had been one of the 8 Brahmins at Siddhartha's naming ceremony. And like Kondañña's father, the tradition tells us he had given his son instructions. Watch this prince. His destiny is extraordinary. If he renounces the world, follow him. Assaji was the youngest, less experienced, less learned than the others. But what he lacked in knowledge, he made up for in enthusiasm, earnestness, devotion. He practiced with complete sincerity, never doubting, never complaining, trusting his companions, trusting the path, trusting that dedication would bring results. When the teaching came at the deer park, the texts indicate Assaji was actually the last to understand. The Buddha had to give him additional personal instruction, clarifying, explaining, helping him grasp what the others had already seen. But once Assaji understood, once he awakened, he became one of the most influential teachers in the early Sangha, not despite his struggles, but perhaps because of them. He understood what it was like to not get it immediately, to need extra help, to struggle, and this made him a compassionate, patient teacher for those who came after. Years later, according to a famous account preserved in multiple sources, Assaji would be walking for alms in the city of Rajagaha, and a young seeker named Sariputta would see him, would be struck by his peaceful presence, his graceful walk, his serene composure. Sariputta followed Assaji, waited until he finished his alms round, and asked, "Friend, who is your teacher? What doctrine do you follow? You have such presence, such peace. I must learn what you know." Assaji, always humble, replied according to the account, "I am new to this teaching. I cannot explain it fully, but I will tell you what I can." And he offered a brief summary, just a few lines, about the nature of a causation, about the arising and ceasing of all conditioned things, all because Assaji walked mindfully through the streets, because his practice showed in his presence, because he was willing to teach despite feeling inadequate, because the Dharma can work through anyone, regardless of their self-assessment. Let go of any sense of inadequacy now. You are enough, just as you are. The Dharma can work through anyone, even you, especially you. These 5, Kondañña, Bhaddiya, Vappa, Mahānāma, Assaji, became the first Sangha, the first community of Buddha's disciples. They were different personalities, different strengths and weaknesses, different backgrounds and temperaments, but united by sincere practice, by awakening, by commitment to the path. Together, they lived simply. The Vinaya texts describe how they walked from village to village, meditated in forests, taught those who asked, accepted alms, owned nothing, depending on generosity, free. They didn't build institutions immediately, didn't create hierarchy or bureaucracy. They simply practiced, lived the Dharma, and naturally, organically. Others joined them. First came Yasa, a wealthy merchant's son who heard the Buddha teach and immediately understood. He became the 6th member of the Sangha. Then Yasa's 4 friends joined, drawn by his transformation, his peace, his joy. Then 50 more of Yasa's acquaintances, all successful young men, all seeking something deeper than wealth could provide. Within months of that first sermon, there were 60 awakened disciples, 60 arahants living and traveling together, spreading the teaching. And the Buddha gave them a mission. According to the Vinaya, "Go forth, O monks," he said, "for the good of the many, for the happiness of the many, out of compassion for the world. Teach the Dharma, beautiful in the beginning, beautiful in the middle, beautiful in the end." And they went in all directions, 60 awakened beings carrying the Dharma to towns and cities, to ascetics and householders, to anyone who would listen. This was the beginning of the great transmission, the spread of Buddhism across India, and eventually across Asia, across the world. A transmission that continues today, that includes us, sitting here, listening to these words. Your breathing is barely perceptible now, so soft, so quiet. Rest, complete rest. The Buddha's wisdom in creating Sangha, community, cannot be overstated. He knew that spiritual practice is not just individual, but relational, that we need others, that together we can go farther than alone. The Sangha provides practical support. When one monk is sick, others care for him. When one struggles with practice, others encourage. When one has insight, others rejoice and learn. The Buddha said in the Upada Sutta, "Spiritual friendship is not half the holy life. It is the whole of the holy life. Everything else depends on it, arises from it, is supported by it." Those first 5, Kondañña, Bhaddiya, Vappa, Mahānāma, Assaji, exemplified this. They had been companions in error, seeking through extreme asceticism, and they became companions in truth, awakening together, supporting each other's practice, celebrating each other's realization. Their friendships deepened rather than diminished with awakening. Freedom made them more loving, not less, more connected, not more isolated. Awakening is not escape from relationship, but transformation of relationship into something pure, clear, supportive, joyful. And this pattern has continued for 2.5 millennia. Sanghas forming, communities of practice, friends on the path, supporting, encouraging, awakening together. In monasteries across Asia, in meditation centers in the West, in small groups meeting in homes, in online communities connecting across distances. The Sangha continues, adapting to new cultures, new time, new needs, but maintaining the essential function: beautiful friendship, noble companionship, mutual support on the path to freedom. You are part of this. Listening now, part of the great Sangha stretching across time, connected to all who have practiced, all who practice now, all who will practice, held by this vast community. Never alone. Sleep now. Rest in this belonging, in this ancient fellowship. You are welcome here. You belong. You are home. Let us linger in that dear park a while longer. Let us feel what it was like, that sacred week when the Dharma first took root, when community first formed, when the world began quietly to change. The full moon hung heavy in the sky, bright enough to cast shadows, to see by. The deer park lived up to its name. Spotted deer moved through the grass, unafraid, protected. This sanctuary had been a refuge for animals for generations, according to tradition, and now it became a refuge for humans seeking liberation. Feel yourself there. Smell the earth, the grass, the night blooming flowers. Hear the distant sounds of Varanasi, the ancient holy city, always active, always full of pilgrims and merchants and seekers. But here in the grove, all is quiet, peaceful, sacred. The Buddha sits on a slight rise, beneath a spreading tree. The texts describe it as occurring near trees suitable for shade. What matters is the tree provided shelter, shade during the day, a natural place to sit, to teach, to gather. The 5 ascetics arrange themselves before him, cross-legged on the grass, faces upturned, listening, learning, transforming. Your body is completely relaxed now. No tension anywhere, just listening, just being carried by this story. But for the others, understanding came more slowly. The teaching penetrated, but not completely, not yet. They were moved, impressed, but not yet awakened. The Buddha was patient. He knew understanding cannot be forced. Wisdom has its own timing. The seed was planted. Now it needed time to sprout, to grow, to bear fruit. The next morning, according to the Vinaya account, the Buddha asked some of them to go into Varanasi for alms, to collect food from the generous citizens who supported wandering monks, while others remained, receiving more instruction, deepening their understanding. This pattern continued for several days, according to traditional accounts, some going for alms, others staying for teaching, everyone eating together at midday. The one meal allowed for monastics, then meditation in the afternoon, more teaching in the evening, rest at night under the stars. Gradually, each of the remaining 4 began to see. Vappa one day, then Bhaddiya, then Mahānāma, finally Assaji, each in their own time, each through their own door, but all arriving at the same truth, the same freedom. The texts describe their realization beautifully, using various metaphors common in Indian spiritual literature. They crossed over from the near shore to the far shore. They left the burning house. They found the deathless. They saw what needed to be seen, did what needed to be done, had nothing more to do. These are metaphors, poetic ways of describing something that words can barely touch. The shift from ignorance to wisdom, from bondage to freedom, from suffering to peace. Let your mind drift through these images, crossing water, leaving fire, finding something beyond death, something eternal yet present, something that was always there, just waiting to be discovered. When all five had awakened, had become arahants according to the tradition, there were 6 awakened beings in the world, no longer just the Buddha alone, but a Sangha, a community of the free. Can you imagine their joy, their relief? After years of struggle, of doubt, of painful practice, finally, success. Finally, the end of seeking, the discovery of what they had been seeking all along. They laughed together, these 6. They felt light, unburdened, complete. The texts say they were like prisoners released, like sick people healed, like those lost who finally found their way home. And the Buddha felt joy too, his compassion fulfilled, his teaching proved effective, the Dharma working, producing its promised fruit. He was not just awakened, but a teacher, a guide, a Buddha who could create other Buddhas. Well, arahants, fully liberated beings, which was his purpose, his mission, his gift to the world. One story preserved in multiple sources tells us that during this period, Yasa, a young man from a wealthy merchant family in Varanasi, was troubled, anxious. Despite having everything he could want materially, he felt empty, unfulfilled, trapped. Something in the Buddha's voice stopped Yasa, calmed him, drew him. He approached, sat down, listened. The Buddha taught him gently, gradually, building understanding step by step about generosity, about virtue, about the dangers of sensual pleasure, about the benefits of renunciation, about the path to peace. And as dawn broke, as the teaching deepened, Yasa saw, understood, awakened to the first stage of liberation, stream entry, the point of no return on the path to full awakening. Yasa's father, discovering his son missing, came searching, found him in the deer park, sitting with the Buddha. And the Buddha taught the father too. And the father also gained wisdom. became a lay follower, the first lay disciple of the Buddha, according to this account. Yasa's mother and wife came, and they too heard the teaching, became followers. The first female lay disciples. Then Yasa formally ordained as a monk, the seventh member of the Sangha, and shortly after, 4 of his friends came. Curious about his transformation, and they heard, practiced, awakened, ordained, then 50 more acquaintances of Yasa, all young men from good families, all successful in worldly terms, but sensing something missing, came and heard, and practiced, and awakened, and ordained. Within months, the Sangha had grown from 6 to 61, all of them arahants according to the traditional accounts, all fully liberated, all capable of teaching others. This rapid growth was remarkable, unprecedented. It showed the power of the Dharma, the hunger for truth that existed, the readiness of beings to awaken when shown the way. Feel yourself part of this, part of the hunger, the readiness, the potential. You too are ready. You too can hear, can understand, can awaken. Stories from this early period are preserved in various sources. The texts focus more on teachings than narratives, but we can imagine the daily life, the rhythm of practice, rising before dawn, the coolest part of the day, sitting in meditation as darkness gives way to light, watching the mind, observing breath, developing concentration, deepening insight. After meditation, morning work, sweeping the grounds, gathering water, simple tasks done mindfully, turning every action into practice. Then, departing for alms round, walking slowly, gracefully, through the streets of Varanasi, bowl in hand, eyes lowered, accepting whatever food is offered. Rice, vegetables, fruit, sometimes sweet, sometimes plain, receiving all with equal mind, with gratitude. Returning to the grove, eating the one meal together, sitting in a circle, mindful of each bite, tasting fully, nourishing the body for practice, not indulging, not denying, the middle way in every aspect of life. Then, afternoon practice, more meditation, or walking meditation under the trees, or listening to the Buddha teach, asking questions, clarifying understanding. Evening. As the sun sets, another session of meditation. Deeper now, quieter. The mind settled from a day of practice, able to go further, see clearer. Night, sleeping under the stars, on the ground, using the robe as blanket and pillow. Simple, direct. Nothing between practitioner and reality. Just presence. Just being. Just rest. This was the life the Buddha and the first Sangha lived according to the accounts. This was how the Dharma was embodied, practiced, transmitted, not through grand gestures or elaborate rituals, but through simple, sincere, consistent practice, day after day, breath by breath. Your breathing has become so soft now, barely there, like a monk sleeping under the stars, peaceful, complete, held by the earth, by the night, by 2,000 years of practitioners who have breathed this same peace. The Buddha's decision to send out the 60 arahants was momentous according to the Vinaya. Instead of keeping them together, building a large monastery, establishing a central institution, he scattered them. Go in all directions, he said. No two of you taking the same road. This showed his understanding. The Dharma is not about one place, one person, one center. It is universal for everyone, everywhere, meant to spread naturally, organically, like seeds on the wind. Each monk went alone or in small groups, wandering, stopping where people gathered, teaching when asked, living simply on alms, showing through their presence, their peace, their joy, that the Dharma works, that freedom is possible. They didn't proselytize aggressively, didn't argue or debate unless challenged, didn't demand conversion. They simply lived the teaching, and those who were ready, those who had, as the Buddha said, little dust in their eyes, recognized what they saw, asked to learn, asked to practice, asked to ordain. The spread was organic, beautiful, like mycelium spreading through soil, invisible at first, but creating networks, connections, slowly transforming the ground, preparing for visible growth, for fruiting bodies that would emerge later. The great monasteries, the vast Sangha, the Buddhist civilization that would arise centuries later. But it all began simply with 60 monks walking in different directions, trusting the Dharma, trusting being's readiness to hear, trusting that truth has its own power, its own momentum, its own way of finding those who need it. And the trust was rewarded. Wherever they went, teachings were heard, practices were adopted, understanding arose, more monks ordained, more lay followers committed. The Dharma took root in soil after soil, adapted to culture after culture, flowered in form after form, but remained essentially unchanged, always pointing toward freedom, toward peace, toward the end of suffering. One story from the commentarial literature tells of a monk, one of the 60, who traveled to a remote village. The villagers were suspicious. They had heard of the Buddha, of these strange new teachings. They were not sure what to make of it. They watched how he meditated under a tree, sat so still for hours, seemed so peaceful, so content, despite owning nothing, having nothing. They watched how he spoke when they approached with questions, gently, patiently, never pushy, never aggressive, offering teachings like gifts, freely given, no strings attached. Gradually, one by one, they began to ask questions, to listen, to try the practices he suggested, to discover for themselves that what he taught actually worked, actually brought peace, actually reduced their suffering. Within a year, according to this account, several villagers had taken refuge in the Triple Gem, becoming lay followers. One young man ordained as a monk, joining the wandering life, carrying the Dharma further. This pattern repeated. Village after village, town after town, the 60 became hundreds, the hundreds became thousands. Slowly, steadily, naturally, the Dharma spread. Let yourself sink deeper now, drifting, the stories carrying you like a river. gentle, inevitable, flowing where they need to flow after sending out the 60. The Vinaya tells us the Buddha himself continued teaching and wandering. He returned to his homeland, to the Sakya kingdom, where his father still ruled, where his wife and son still lived, where he had been a prince. This reunion was difficult, according to the traditional accounts. His father was angry at first, grief-stricken. Why did you leave us? Why did you abandon your duties? What about your son, your wife, your kingdom? But when King Suddhodana saw his son, saw the transformation, the peace, the wisdom, the complete absence of the suffering that had driven Siddhartha to leave, the king's heart softened. He listened to the teaching, practiced, gained understanding, and near the end of his life, according to Buddhist tradition, achieved awakening, dying peacefully, liberated, grateful for a son who found the way beyond suffering and showed it to others, including his own father. The Buddha's son, Rahula, was 7 years old when they reunited according to traditional chronology. The Buddha ordained him as the first child monk, taught him personally, guided him patiently, and Rahula grew up in the Dharma, becoming, according to later accounts, one of the most accomplished monks of his generation, famous for his discipline, his dedication, his perfect practice. The Buddha's wife, Yasodhara, who had raised Rahula alone, who had chosen to live as an ascetic herself after Siddhartha left, maintaining her own spiritual practice, was also reunited with the Buddha. According to traditional accounts, she did not speak to him at first. Her grief was too deep, her sense of abandonment too strong. But she heard him teach, saw the transformation in others, and gradually she too understood. She too found the path, and eventually she ordained as a nun, becoming an arahanta, fully liberated, no longer his wife, but his spiritual equal, his Dharma sister, freed. Your eyes are closed now, or nearly closed, the stories washing over you like waves, gentle, rhythmic, carrying you toward sleep, toward rest, toward peace. The deer park at Sarnath became a sacred place, a pilgrimage site for Buddhists across Asia. Emperors and paupers alike came to see where it all began, where the wheel first turned, where the Dharma entered the world. The Dhammacakkappavattana still stands, massive, ancient, marking the spot where, according to tradition, the Buddha taught. Archaeologists have excavated ruins of monasteries that housed thousands of monks in later centuries, all drawn to this holy ground, this birthplace of Buddhist teaching. During certain centuries, Sarnath was one of the great Buddhist centers, rivaling Nalanda University in influence. Monks from across Asia came to study, to practice, to walk where the Buddha walked, to meditate where he meditated, to teach where he taught. But like all conditioned things, even great centers rise and fall. Sarnath declined, was eventually destroyed, forgotten, overgrown. Only the great stupa remaining, a marker of past glory, past devotion. In the 19th century, British archaeologists rediscovered the site, began excavations, uncovered treasures. The famous sculpture of the Buddha preaching his first sermon, the Ashoka pillar with its lion capital, ruins of temples and monasteries, artifacts showing the devotion of centuries. Today, Sarnath is being restored. New temples built by Buddhist communities from Thailand, Tibet, Burma, Sri Lanka, Japan, each in their own style, each honoring this sacred place, each saying, "We too are part of this lineage, this transmission, this turning of the wheel that began here 25 centuries ago." When you visit, and perhaps someday you will, you can sit in meditation at the Dhammacakkappavattana, can walk where the Buddha walked, can feel the presence of those first teachings, those first awakening, that first Sangha. Or you can do what you're doing now. Rest. Listen. Absorb. Let these stories work their way into your deepest consciousness, planting seeds that will sprout in their own time, bearing fruit you cannot yet imagine. Sleep now. The deer park is quiet. The moon has set. The stars shine bright. All is peace, all is rest. The Dharma has done its work. The wheel has turned, and you are held in its momentum, carried forward toward awakening, toward freedom, toward home. As we drift deeper into rest, into sleep, let us gather the threads of this teaching, weaving them together, seeing the pattern whole. We began in that deer park at Sarnath, on a full moon evening 25 centuries ago, where a man newly awakened sat with 5 skeptical companions and began to speak. What he shared that evening changed everything. Not through force, not through miracles, but through truth. Simple, direct, verifiable truth about the nature of existence and the end of suffering. He taught the middle way, avoiding extremes of indulgence and denial, finding balance, wisdom, the path that actually works, not theory, not speculation, but lived experience, tested, proven, true. This middle way is not compromise, not mediocrity, not settling for less. It is the most radical path, the path that goes beyond all extremes, all polarities, all false choices, finding truth in balance, in awareness, in presence. For us today, in our modern lives, the middle way remains profoundly relevant. We too face extremes, workaholism or laziness, asceticism or hedonism, spiritual bypassing or worldly immersion. And we too need to find balance, the middle way that honors both body and spirit, both practical life and spiritual aspiration. The Buddha showed us, through his own journey, that neither extreme works. Sensual pleasure does not satisfy, but neither does self-torture. What works is mindful balance, taking care of genuine needs while not being enslaved by endless wants, disciplining the mind without destroying the body, walking the middle way. Your breathing is so slow now, so peaceful, balanced, not too much, not too little, just right. The middle way of breath, effortless, natural, wise. In that first sermon, according to most textual traditions, the Buddha introduced teachings that would become central to all Buddhism. though we have not explored them in detail tonight, saving them for another journey. What matters is understanding that these teachings came from direct experience, from awakening, from seeing reality as it is. The Buddha did not ask his listeners to believe, but to test, to practice, to see for themselves. This empirical approach, this invitation to verify through experience, set Buddhism apart from many religious traditions, making it both spiritual and scientific, both faith and investigation. "Come and see," he said, "Ehai pasiko. Don't believe me. Test it yourself. Practice this path. Discover if what I say is true." This confidence came from certainty. The Buddha had seen, had awakened, had verified these truths in his own consciousness, and he knew that anyone who practiced correctly would verify them too. There was no need for blind faith. Truth reveals itself to those who look properly. And the first 5 disciples did look, did practice, and they did see, each in their own time, each through their own door, but all arriving at the same shore, the same freedom, the same peace beyond understanding. Kondañña first, the eldest, who according to tradition had predicted this moment 40 years earlier, whose vow was finally fulfilled, who saw and knew and exclaimed his understanding. Then the others, Bhaddiya with his gentle heart, Vappa with his quiet persistence, Mahānāma with his family connections, Assaji with his humble sincerity, all awakening according to the accounts, all becoming free, all forming with the Buddha, the first Sangha, the first community of the liberated. The rapid growth of the early Sangha, according to traditional accounts, from 6 to 61 in just months, showed the hunger for truth that existed, the readiness of beings to hear and practice and awaken when shown the way. These 60 arahants, these fully liberated beings, were then sent out in all directions according to the Vinaya. Go forth for the good of the many, for the happiness of the many. Teach the Dharma. And they went, scattering like seeds, taking root where they landed, teaching, guiding, awakening others, beginning the great transmission that continues today. The Dharma spread naturally, organically, not through conquest or coercion, but through the power of truth, through the peace and wisdom visible in practitioners, through the actual results people experienced when they practiced. This organic growth continues. The Dharma adapts to new cultures, new times, new expressions, while remaining essentially unchanged, always pointing toward the same liberation, the same truth the Buddha discovered under that Bodhi tree, taught in that deer park, transmitted through 25 centuries, reaching somehow, miraculously, even to us, sitting here tonight, listening, learning, practicing in our own way. Your mind is so quiet now, so still, like a pond at dawn. No ripples, just clarity, just peace. The Dharma working in you, even as you sleep, even as you let go. That first sermon at Sarnath created 3 refuges, 3 jewels: Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, the awakened teacher, the teaching itself, and the community of practitioners, all emerging together in that deer park, all necessary, all interdependent, all precious beyond measure. The Buddha refuge, knowing that awakening is possible, that someone has done it, has shown the way, has proven that human beings can transcend suffering, can find liberation. This gives us hope, confidence, inspiration. We too can awaken. We too can find what he found. The Dharma refuge, the teaching itself, the path, the practices, the understanding, verifiable, testable, reliable, like a map that actually corresponds to territory, like a medicine that actually heals. This gives us direction, method, means to practice, to progress, to realize. The Sangha refuge, the community, fellow practitioners, those who have gone before, those who walk beside us, those who will come after, supporting, encouraging, inspiring, showing us we're not alone. that the path can be walked, that others understand. This gives us fellowship, belonging, context for our practice. These three arose together in Sarnath according to Buddhist tradition, and they continue together, inseparable, each supporting the others, each necessary for the complete teaching, each offering refuge from suffering, shelter from confusion, direction toward freedom. And you, listening now, take refuge too, perhaps not formally, perhaps not even consciously, but in your seeking, in your listening, in your willingness to hear ancient wisdom, in your longing for peace. You are taking refuge. You are saying yes to the Dharma, yes to the possibility of freedom, yes to the path. The Buddha's journey from palace to forest to enlightenment to deer park mirrors our own journeys. We too start in comfort or discomfort, in pleasure or pain, in confusion about what will truly satisfy. We too seek, experiment, try different paths, different extremes, learning through experience what works and what doesn't. We too can abandon extremes, find the middle way, practice with balance and wisdom, and we too can awaken, perhaps not as fully as the Buddha, perhaps not in this lifetime, but we can move in that direction. We can reduce suffering, increase peace, grow in wisdom and compassion, and that is enough. That is beautiful. That is the path. The deer park at Sarnath, the full moon, the 5 ascetics, the Buddha's voice. These are not just historical facts, but living symbols, archetypes, representing something timeless, the moment when truth speaks, when the heart opens, when understanding dawns, when freedom becomes possible. That moment happens again and again, in every generation, in every culture. Whenever someone hears the Dharma and recognizes it, practices it, and experiences its truth, realizes its promise, and embodies its wisdom. That moment is happening now. For you, as you listen, as you rest, as you absorb these teachings, the wheel turning once more, the Dharma alive once more in your consciousness, in your life, in your heart. Feel it turning. Feel the ancient momentum, 25 centuries of practice, of awakening, of transmission, flowing through you, carrying you, supporting you. You are part of this. You have always been part of this. You belong to this lineage, whether you claim it formally or not. Your breathing is barely there now. Just the faintest movement. In, out, effortless. The body breathing itself. The mind quiet, receptive, open. The Dharma entering, settling, taking root. The Buddha's first sermon is never finished. It continues in every teaching given, every practice session, every moment of clarity, every experience of peace. The wheel keeps turning. The Dharma keeps spreading. The Sangha keeps growing. You are part of this continuation, this turning, this growing, not separate, not outside, but included, embraced, held. You are a node in this vast network of practice, connected to all others, held by all others, supporting all others just by being here, just by practicing, just by saying yes to wisdom. Sleep now, completely, deeply. Let everything go. The teaching is complete. The wheel has turned. You have heard what you needed to hear, received what you needed to receive. The rest will unfold in its own time, in its own way, without your effort, without your worry. Trust the process. Trust the Dharma. Trust your own Buddha nature, your own capacity for awakening. It is there. It has always been there. Just waiting. Patient. Eternal. Ready. The deer rest in the park. The moon sets. Stars fade into dawn. And somewhere, always, the Buddha is teaching. The Dharma is turning. The Sangha is practicing. And you are part of it all. Held, loved, guided, home. We have traveled far together tonight, across 25 centuries, across countless miles, from present to past and back again, discovering that truth is timeless, that wisdom is always fresh, that the teachings given in that deer park speak to us now, in this moment, in our lives, offering the same liberation, the same peace, the same way beyond suffering. The Buddha's first sermon, according to Buddhist tradition, set in motion something that has not stopped, cannot stop, will never stop: the turning of the Dharma wheel, the spread of wisdom, the awakening of beings, generation after generation, culture after culture, the same truth expressed in countless ways, adapted to countless contexts, but always, always pointing toward freedom. You have heard this teaching now. It has entered your consciousness, planted seeds that will grow in their own time, bearing fruit you cannot predict or control. Trust this. Trust the Dharma working in you, even without your awareness, especially without your effort. Thank you for being here, for listening, for opening your heart to ancient wisdom, for giving yourself this time of rest and learning, of peace and possibility. Thank you to the Buddha, who, according to tradition, walked both extremes, found the middle way, achieved awakening, and compassionately chose to teach, to share, to guide others to the same freedom he had found. Thank you to those first 5 disciples, according to the accounts: Kondañña, Bhaddiya, Vappa, Mahānāma, Assaji, who listened, practiced, awakened, and became the first Sangha, beginning the community that has supported practice for 2.5 millennia. Thank you to all the teachers, all the practitioners, all the awakened beings across history who have kept this teaching alive, transmitted it faithfully, adapted it wisely, ensuring it reached across oceans and centuries to find us here, now, tonight. You don't need to remember everything from tonight, or anything at all. What you need will stay with you, will work in you. The rest can drift away like dreams, like morning mist, leaving only essence. only what serves, only what liberates. The middle way is not something to master, but something to embody, to live, to breathe. It unfolds naturally when we stop fighting, stop forcing, stop swinging between extremes, just settling into balance, into awareness, into presence. The Dharma is not far away, not in ancient India, not in monasteries, not in books. It is here, now, in this breath, this moment, this awareness, always accessible, always available, always offering freedom to those who practice, who look, who see. The Sangha surrounds you, even if you practice alone. Even if you've never met another Buddhist, you are connected to all who have practiced, all who practice now, all who will practice, held in this vast web of Dharma, never alone, always supported, always home. May these teachings bring you peace. May your sleep be deep and restorative. May you find balance, peace, freedom, and may you know in your deepest heart that you are not alone on this path, that countless beings across time and space have walked this way before you and found what you are seeking. The Dharma is not something to strive for, but something to recognize, already present, already complete, just waiting for you to stop, to breathe, to see. It was there, in that deer park 25 centuries ago. It is here, in your heart, this very moment. The wheel turns, the Dharma flows, the Sangha grows, and you are part of it all. Rest now, dear friend, rest. Let go of everything, every thought, every concern, every seeking. Just rest in this moment, this peace, this freedom. The Buddha's first sermon is complete. The teaching has been given. The wheel has turned. And you have heard. That is enough. That is everything. Sleep well, sleep deeply, sleep peacefully. May the Dharma carry you through the night. May wisdom illuminate your dreams. You have found what you were seeking. You are home. Peace. Rest. Sleep well.